Hey, everybody, diving into the world of cloud communications and UCaaS and more today with Evolve IP. Peter, how are you?
Well, nice to see you there, Evan.
Good to see you. Really intrigued by the work you're doing and your mission around cloud communications and collaboration and beyond. Maybe introductions in order, both to Evolve IP and yourself. Tell us about the team and the work you're doing.
Sure. Evolve IP is a cloud communications provider, and we do we make remote work easy, right? And it's something we've always been doing pre-pandemic. That just happened to really hit at the right time. And what I mean by that, we're in unified communications, we're in contact center, and then we're in cloud computing. DAS is a strength of ours. We also do
Mm.
IaaS, and then all of the security stuff that goes around it. And then over on the voice side of the house, we do collaboration and call recording and intelligent call recording, and all of the things that you would expect from a cloud communications provider. I've been with Evolve IP since its beginning back in 2007.
Wow.
I ran voice engineering for up until just earlier this year, right? Which was 17 years. I ran voice engineering. We've been through a good number, dozen or so acquisitions over the years.
Wow.
Some of it over in Europe. So we've got a European arm of Evolve IP. You'll see them listed as Evolve IP EMEA. And in EMEA, we're primarily focused on the voice side of the business. We're not doing the compute business there today. We may tomorrow. I don't know. We are working towards, actually, we've made some changes over the past year, including myself. Like I said, I moved over into the product side earlier this year. Basically to lend a hand where I thought a hand was needed and to, take a change of pace for myself, right? I've been doing this with Evolve for 17 years, but, I've been in engineering for 30. In fact, I think you and I probably met somewhere along the way back in your Acme Packet days.
Wow, that's quite a flashback. And I'm getting nostalgic here. But fast forward to now, you know this industry so well. I wouldn't say you're the typical UCaaS provider, and there are many of those. But your business model and your platform's quite novel. Maybe describe a little bit about your position in this landscape and what makes you so different.
Sure. And this is one of the things that is both a good thing and a bad thing for us, because people have a hard time sticking us in a box. They don't know necessarily how to classify us. And where that's a good thing is it's a differentiator, right? And what I mean by that is we can go in and help people with, their communications needs on the UC side or whatever, or we can talk to them about their compute needs and helping them to secure their environment. And I'll come back to that a little bit later. But what really makes us different is, particularly when you compare us against the other compute like DAS providers, we've got a real strength in voice, right? And that is a little bit of a differentiator. Most of them will be able to do some sort of a voice overlay, right? Maybe they can run the apps. Maybe they figured out how to do the real-time audio and video well. Right? It takes some work to optimize that. We've got that pretty well nailed. And, being able to have that conversation, where it helps us as a company is being able to, start the conversation very broadly and understand where the customer's needs may come from and, begin to tailor a solution. And it may be in compute, or it may be on the voice side of the house. It might be contact center, right? Wherever their needs might be, I think we've got a pretty good handle on how to help. It's rare that somebody is in the buying cycle for all three things at the same time. So it helps us in that way, right? It gets our foot in the door from a couple of different perspectives. But, we're in it to try and help solve issues that people are having. I mentioned earlier about helping people secure their environment. Obviously, top of mind for most companies these days. And while we won't consider ourselves a security company, nor do the products, like DAS by itself is not a security solution, but it does help them manage and secure their environment and makes it a little easier to manage that way. And then we have a whole suite of software that we can talk about and solutions around that to help really protect them and, the defense in depth posture. So the fact that we do both sides of the fence makes us a little bit different. Even when you talk about pure play voice, it's changed in the last few years, as you know, where you used to be, you had your swim lane, you were in UC or you were in contact center, but you generally didn't do both. We've been doing it for a long time. And in fact, that was one of the acquisitions back in 2017. We acquired a software solution for contact centers specifically. So, yeah, I think that's
exciting. And it's unusual, to say the least, to have UCaaS with CCaaS, Cloud Contact Center. Talk about the cloud, contact center world and how you see yourself evolving in it. And it is a super high growth area right now in tech. What are the opportunities that you're seeing there?
Where our strength is we play in the mid-market. So, north of 250 seats to somewhere in the 5,000, that's our sweet spot. We certainly have customers that are smaller and some that are larger. But in that range is sort of our sweet spot. And where we really excel is not necessarily, we're not trying to sell to a 5,000 seat contact center BPO or something like that. That's not who we are. Where we excel is, in the 1,000 or 2,000 seat enterprise, and maybe they are, a home healthcare provider who happens to have a contact center, right? And so we're going to help them with their communication overall. And then we're going to figure out how do we, really position the contact center to suit the need that they have. So in that space, maybe they've got a contact center with 100 agents or something like that. That's kind of who we are. And then where I think our strength is in that space is, the underlying UC platform that we're running on today is Broadworks. And we've done a lot to really integrate the contact center to Broadworks. And if you're familiar with Broadworks, the old call center feature, if you want to call it that, which we had turned into a practice prior to buying this other software. We had really built a whole practice around call center. So this would have been in like the early 2010s up to like 2015, 2016. And we had built a suite of software to go around it, dashboards and reporting and stuff that made it interesting and different from what others in the industry were doing with it. So we had developed a fairly strong base of call center providers. And then, the market started to change and the omni-channel started to become a thing. And so we went on the hunt and bought this company that, really feature rich, does pretty much all of the same stuff that the big guys do. But to 80%, 90%, we're not going to compete against Genesys by any means. Right. If somebody's going to do the feature comparison of Evolve IP against Genesys, and that's the thing that matters to them, we're not getting that business. And that's fine, right? That's not who we are. What we are, though, is, feature rich that covers what most people are actually going to use out of the system. And then we're going to, like I said, we're going to really integrate it so that not only is it, a separate system, but it looks and feels like it's part of the UC platform where, if you go off hook on your phone, the contact center knows, okay, maybe his administrative state is available, but his actual state is busy. So I'm not going to deliver a call to that person. So we spent a lot of time doing that kind of stuff and really integrating it to make it look and feel like one. So if you're a contact center agent, on your screen, you can pull up a directory and it's going to give you the directory of the entire enterprise, and you can extension dial between them and all that.
A fantastic opportunity for your customers. You also talk a lot about remote work, and these pesky knowledge workers, they don't want to go in the office, certainly not full time. And so remote work hybrid work is still very much a reality. But how do you look at supporting those folks on a continued basis with advanced services and tech support? What's your philosophy there?
Sure. Let me start with the tech support first, which is we generally will work with the IT staff of whatever company we're dealing with. And again, being in the mid-market, they generally are going to have some amount of IT staff. So we're not taking direct end user calls. We're working through their IT staff, which I think helps in both cases. When it comes to the remote work and hybrid work and so forth, a couple of things have helped to a degree. In even like the early pandemic, everybody goes home. Luckily, we were already on the Teams bandwagon. It was a product that we sold. We had a good customer base on it. We are Teams users ourselves. So moving people home was an easy thing to do. But you still had an awful lot of people who hadn't made that leap to some sort of a UC or some sort of a collab choice. And so, moving them home, it was okay, take your phone home and we're going to help you get through the bumps of trying to get a phone turned up at your house. Because as you know, like home routers and sometimes do weird things with SIP. But, the collab side of it has changed the world from that perspective. DAS similarly, right? Where, my desktop is wherever I go. In fact, I've got a story from a couple of years ago. It was Christmas Day. I was at my mom's, and she's in New York. I'm from Pennsylvania, and I get a call. Somebody needs help with something. Okay. Well, I didn't bring my laptop along. It was Christmas Day. I didn't think to. So I just logged onto mom's really old, really clunky PC, was able to open up my DAS. My environment was exactly the way I left it, and I was able to solve the issue. Now, that was with a browser. I generally work with a client installed. It's a little bit easier of a experience. But generally speaking, in a DAS environment, you can connect from whatever machine you were on. Like earlier today, I was on my home PC. Now I'm on a laptop for this call. And, same thing, right? I just closed the window over there. I opened it over here, and everything was where it was. And being able to do that either from your house and then do it from work and so forth, what that enables is a couple of things. One is, again, the IT staff, it simplifies their management of their overall environment, for one, right? Because now they're not managing, let's say you got 200 users. They're not managing 200 endpoints out in the field. Now they're really doing it from the core of the network, which means that their security posture and all of the things that go with it are the same. And secondly, when you compare DAS against a VPN as an example, VPN is a great solution for what it was, but I think its days are sort of over because, you're having to pull files down and push files back up across the wire versus a DAS where it's just a window. It's like, it's like watching a YouTube. You don't have to download the video to watch a YouTube anymore. It's just streaming the screen at you. So in a DAS environment, I'm doing the same thing. It's just streaming my window at me so I can work. And, again, I'm centralizing all of that. I'm centralizing the management of it, easier to secure that way. And if you go back to the VPN example, if I'm a home user and I got my laptop and maybe I'm working at Starbucks and I just downloaded something from across a VPN, somebody steals that laptop, they now have access to the file that I was just working on. in a DaaS environment, that window closes. There's no files. There's nothing left behind, right? So, in that way, that's what I was talking about earlier, where DaaS is not a security solution, but it enables, it's a security enabler from that perspective. It makes life a little easier from that perspective.
Oh, it's a great point and really valuable. And you mentioned security compliance. I think you work with a lot of companies and highly regulated businesses, industries. How do you think about that? As you're not a security vendor per se, but how do you think about hardening your environment, their environment against all these threats on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, there's threats every day. You read about it in the news. There's been huge one after huge one recently. We, like you said, we are not going to make customers compliant, but we will help them along the way, right? So they're the environment that we're working in, right, we run through PCI, which means that we have to go through the scans and remediation of everything on a quarterly basis. We've got to so we do PCI, we do HITRUST, we do SOC. So with the various compliance things, that's essentially saying that Evolve IP is meeting those standards, right? But that doesn't mean that by proxy that customer becomes compliant. Right? It means that we can give them the cert and that satisfies that part of their certification. They still have to run through their normal course of business from that perspective. But we do deal with things like PCI. So as an example, I mentioned earlier, call recording and intelligent call recording, the ability to automatically redact anything that might be personal information or credit cards or social security numbers, things like that. We're using tools that have that capability to be able to automatically redact that stuff so it doesn't show up in your recordings. So those are the kinds of things that we would look to do. And I don't know, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes total sense. And that's more than your typical MSP or reseller would do. That's for sure. And speaking of the industry, the landscape, you work with pretty much who's who in the industry. I see VMware by Broadcom, obviously Microsoft is a key partner. Cisco, tell us about those partnerships and how you see that helping customers.
Well, let me start with Broadcom VMware because anybody that's in that side of the business is aware of the shakeup that Broadcom made significant changes to licensing, and anybody that was below a certain size in terms of core counts had to go find another vendor to buy from. They would no longer sell direct to them. And Evolve IP being of reasonable size and scale, we became one of those partners. We're able to, there it is. We're one of their partners, and we can help them with the licensing and support from that perspective. So decent relationship there. The changes with Broadcom still, we're learning every day what's happening. As far as some of the other vendors that we deal with, Microsoft, we are a CSP so we're selling Microsoft licensing, the entire suite. I mentioned earlier, we do Teams as a collab tool. We also do Cisco WebEx as a collab tool, and we're considering others. So for all of those kinds of things, anything Microsoft, we're pretty well equipped to handle that. Cisco is a huge partner. I mentioned BroadSoft earlier, or BroadWorks. Used to be a BroadSoft owned property. Cisco acquired BroadSoft. So, by way of acquisition, we are a Cisco customer that way. But we also do an awful lot on the Cisco hardware side. So most of our DaaS infrastructure and certainly our routing and switching infrastructure, but also on the server side, a lot of that is Cisco based, super high performance stuff.
Interesting. Well, you have a lot of arrows in your quiver, as it
Indeed.
were, to help customers. And how do you think about integration or systems integration with customer systems or legacy systems? As that can get pretty hairy when it comes to technical debt. Well, as an engineering leader, I guess with that hat on, how do you integrate with all that existing IT, or is it simpler than it used to be?
Well, I mean, maybe it's simpler. I'd never call it simple.
Mm.
But if we're having those kinds of conversations around tech debt, we're thinking about it probably in the compute side of the house, right? Maybe they've got some old hardware. Maybe they're trying to get out of managing their own. In a lot of cases, we're talking to people who have run their own VDI and they want to offload that. And they still want that virtual experience. They still want all of the richness that comes with that, but they just don't want to manage the hardware and the cost that comes with it. In those cases, we do have tools and expertise to be able to help them, make that move, virtual to virtual. We also can do, the physical to virtual, transform their data from one to the other. Pretty well laid out processes that way. Great staff of engineering that can handle that kind of work. So I think that's where some of our value comes in because, in those cases, we are an MSP, right? We're helping with the work that it's going to take to make that happen and do it well because it's our bread and butter. It's what we do. And at the same time, we're educating them about how we can help them maybe rethink their security posture and what things they should be doing to really secure themselves. Sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. Right? And it's our job to make sure that they're at least aware of what is possible and what we can do for them, and how to make it better. And if not anything else, make sure that they've got exceptional uptime. Make sure that they've got all of the options available to them as far as DR or backup as a service. We do that. So we're trying to make it. And in fact, one of our sales engineers, brilliant guy, Kevin, he has this saying, and I'm sure I'm going to butcher it, but he says, if you can prevent an incident, prevent it. If you can't prevent it, mitigate it, how big it becomes. And if you can't mitigate it, be able to recover from it. So I think it's a really smart way of looking at this, right? You want to make sure that you build out your protection, build out your walls as strong as you can. But if somebody infiltrates, you want to make sure that it's contained, right? So it doesn't spread throughout the network. And if you can't do that, you got to make sure that you can at least recover from it. So that's where the backup and, the DR all comes into play.
Yeah, so important these days. And when it comes to the future, when it comes to innovation, R&D, acquisitions that you're making, how do you think about your own approach to innovation R&D, not just partnering with vendors to rely on all the dollars they invest, but building out your own capabilities? You're a little different in that regard, right? Because you do have engineers on the bench who do this work as well. I assume that's something you're looking to continue.
Yeah. So when we look at the things that we actually create ourselves, we continue to innovate around the contact center space. So we have developers there. We also developed our main portal for the UC management. So we will continue to, keep that up and continue to innovate. We're working on the next version of that. And then we have a couple of smaller point things that we do ourselves. For the most part, we're really good at integrating third-party stuff. So the things where we're writing code is where, that's kind of a bit of an anomaly for us. It's more about, putting together your best of breed and making sure that people, can get the feature functionality that they need and being able to really put them together in a way that makes sense. So as an example, some of the things that you see the name Dubber there. That was the call recording and the intelligent call recording stuff that we just talked about. So it's a partner. Customers know that we're using third party for that, but we're trying to find ways to make that simpler to consume, make it feel like part of the family, right? So it's part of the service without having to deal with another vendor or another something else, right? It's all part of it. And then really just trying to stay on top of what each of those vendors' capabilities are and making sure that we're moving the puck forward on all of this.
Oh, fantastic approach. And I guess final question here, as we look out the next year or two, what tech trends or future trends are you most excited about? Beyond the ones that you here and now, but what's on your sort of radar with a futurist hat on?
Well, it would be remiss of me to not at least bring up AI. And AI means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And so we're still wrestling with where does this play for our customers, right? Where do they want us to go with it? It has a logical place in the contact center, and we're not there today, but we're pretty darn close, and we're moving in that direction. So in that case, again, if you compare us against Genesys, I'm sure that they have a full suite of functionality in the AI space. And so, but we're going to get there. But we also look at things like what some of our partners do, what Teams offers in AI and Copilot, and what WebEx can do with AI natively, and what Dubber does in terms of AI and its ability to not just transcribe calls, but for them to be able to sort of pick up on trends and be able to report them and create some sort of analyses around hey, this is what your sales motion looks like, and be able to get analytic data, not just the service, not just the recordings. And because of that, using that as the example, it makes it so that where in a typical contact center, maybe somebody listens to 3, maybe 5% of the calls as a QA, AI can listen to 100% of them and tell you which ones to pay attention to. And it's a game changer in that space.
Yeah, so many opportunities. The future looks so bright. Well, thanks so much, Peter, for just sharing a little bit behind the curtain and incredible work you're doing and a peek into where you're headed in the future. Really insightful and nice to catch up, and hope to see you at one of the many industry events coming up this fall and beyond, Enterprise Connect, all the usual ones. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, Evan.
And thanks so much, everyone, for watching. Reach out, follow Evolve IP. They're doing some great work in this space. Take care. Have a great 4th of July.